So now a fair amount of the book, I must say, particularly toward the end, really has to do with the possibility of Russia interfering in the U.S. in the U.S. election of the president. Tell us about this investigation by Mr. Mueller, because right now, today in the news, President Trump is saying that investigation is unconstitutional. How important is the Mueller investigation?
Well, I think it's quite important, and I guess my role in this kind of ended in January 2017 when 4 elements of the intelligence community published our intelligence community assessment, which documented the magnitude of the Russian interference in our election. And that, looking back now, that is kind of the catalyst for what led to the appointment of the special counsel and his investigation. I think what Bob Mueller and his team are doing is extremely important for the country. There's a cloud, I think, that's over the nation, particularly with respect to the issue of collusion. And I think the only hope for actually resolving that one way or the other is through the special counsel investigation. So it's quite important. And
we want to talk about that allegation of collusion. But before we get to that, before we get to the question whether there was actually any connection with the campaign directly, were you assured while you were there, and do you have any sense that the government of the United States, led by President Trump, takes seriously just the interference or attempted interference by Russia in the election, regardless of whether there was collusion?
Well, it's hard to know. On the one hand, President Trump has criticized President Obama and the Obama administration for not doing enough about the meddling, and on the other hand, he says it didn't occur and it had no impact on the election. So I will say that I think the president-elect on the 6th of January evinced an attitude that really hasn't changed a bit since, and that is that anything that seems to cast doubt on the legitimacy of his election is just very hard for him to accept.
So you've come under some criticism or questioning, at least, by President Trump yourself. I'm going to play something that he said specifically about spying on his campaign. Listen to what he had to say.
When they look at the documents, I think people are going to see a lot of bad things happen. I hope it's not so, because if it is, there's never been anything like it in the history of our country. I mean, if you look at Clapper, he sort of admitted that they had spies in the campaign yesterday, inadvertently. But I hope it's not true, but it looks like it is.
So there you have it, Mr. Director. He says that you, James Clapper, admitted there were spies. You were in charge of spies, essentially, for the United States government. To the best of your knowledge, were there any spies for the United States government in the Trump campaign?
Well, first, about the use of the term spy, air quotes, which I have never liked in any event, and it certainly doesn't apply in this case. And I think the President is referring to remarks I made on The View a week or so ago, in which I said actually just the opposite, that this wasn't spying, certainly not on the campaign. There's a big difference between an informant, which is a very legitimate and highly regularized process that the FBI has long used for gathering valuable information in criminal investigations and counterintelligence investigations. So what happened was a far cry from what is normally associated, again, air quotes, with the term spy, and in that there was no, this was not a trained case officer. He did not employ clandestine tradecraft. There was no recruiting. There's no attempt to hide his identity. This is the most benign form of information gathering that you can come up with. And importantly, the big point here is the concern was, were the Russians infiltrating or attempting to infiltrate the campaign, and were they trying to gain influence or leverage? That's the important point. So no, not as I would think of the term spying as it's normally applied. No, and that's what I said.